My fiancé's family called me cheap for buying a modest ring, so I sold the house, cut contact, and they finally learned what real loss feels like. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and I thought proposing to the love of my life would be the happiest moment of my life. For weeks, I planned every single detail, the timing, the spot, even the song playing in the background. I wanted it to be personal, something that felt like us, not some Instagram-perfect fantasy. So I took Claire to the same hill where we had our first real conversation 3 years ago, where she told me she believed love wasn't about material things, but about meaning. The sky was painted with shades of gold and lavender. The air smelled like rain, and my hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the ring box. When I finally got on one knee and asked, "Claire, will you marry me?" she froze, covering her mouth. Then tears started spilling down her cheeks. She whispered, "Yes." For that brief, fragile moment, I swear it felt like everything I'd ever worked for, every overtime shift, every sacrifice was worth it. The ring wasn't extravagant. It wasn't supposed to be. I'd chosen a modest diamond set in a simple gold band, something timeless, something that felt genuine. Claire had always said she hated flashy things. She smiled as I slid it onto her finger, but her eyes, God, there was something unreadable in them. A flicker of hesitation I tried to ignore. That night, her family invited us over to celebrate. I walked in nervous but hopeful, expecting hugs and congratulations. Instead, I was met with tight smiles and curious glances that lingered too long on Claire's hand. Her mother tilted her head and said softly, "Oh, that's cute." Her father's eyebrows twitched. I tried to laugh it off, but my stomach sank. It was the first time I felt like my love was being measured, weighed, and silently judged by people who didn't even know me yet. And I didn't realize it then. But that dinner was just the beginning of something much uglier. The moment we sat down, I could feel the tension hidden beneath polite smiles. Claire's parents had set the table like it was a royal banquet, fine china, candles, the works. Her mother poured wine with a smirk that didn't reach her eyes. "To our future son-in-law," she said, raising her glass, "who clearly believes in simplicity." Everyone laughed, everyone except me. At first I thought I was being paranoid. Maybe it was just awkward humor. But then her father leaned forward and said, "So, how much did the ring set you back, son?" The way he said "son" sounded more like charity case. Claire's fork froze midair. "Dad, don't," she whispered, but he ignored her. "I'm just curious," he continued. "You can tell a lot about a man's priorities from how he proposes." I forced a smile. "I believe love doesn't need a price tag," I said, trying to sound calm. Her sister always, the loud one, snorted. "That's one way to spin cheap." The laughter that followed didn't feel like laughter. It felt like a verdict. Claire sat there in silence, pretending to sip her wine, eyes fixed on the tablecloth. I kept waiting for her to say something, anything to defend me. She didn't single quotes. Her mother leaned closer. "You know, Claire's ex bought her a ring from Tiffany's," she said, almost wistfully. "But I suppose not every man can afford that." I felt something inside me twist humiliation, mixed with disbelief. I wanted to leave, to shout, to break the illusion of civility, but I stayed seated, smiling like a fool while they took turns belittling me. When we finally got home, Claire said softly, "They didn't mean it like that," but the words didn't soothe me, they just made it worse, because deep down, I realized something terrifying. She didn't see anything wrong with it, and that's when I knew I hadn't just proposed to Claire. I'd proposed to her entire family after that dinner. Something between us shifted. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was subtle, like a faint crack in glass that spreads slowly until the whole thing shatters. Claire started bringing up her family more often. Little comments like, "Mom thinks you'd look great in a tailored suit," or "Dad says maybe you should think about a higher-paying job before we start planning." Each one landed like a soft jab, small but cumulative. I told myself she didn't mean it that way, that she was just caught between love and loyalty. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more obvious it became. Her parents had planted a seed of doubt, and it was growing fast. I started working longer hours, trying to prove myself both to them and to her. I picked up freelance work on weekends, skipped nights out, and started saving again. When I finally surprised her with an expensive dinner at a rooftop restaurant, she smiled politely, but glanced around like she was measuring the place. "This is nice," she said. My sister's fiancé took her to the same chain but in Paris. The words hit me harder than she realized. I laughed it off, but inside I felt like I was competing in a race I never agreed to run. I began to notice the way she compared things, her coworkers, vacations, her friends' gifts, even the way other couples posted about their lives online. And every time I tried to pull her closer, she seemed to drift a little farther. One night, when I asked if she was still happy, she hesitated before saying, "Of course. I just wish my family could see what I see in you." That line haunted me, because for the first time, I started to wonder if she still saw it herself. And as much as I wanted to believe love was enough, deep down, I could feel it slipping through my fingers. I thought maybe if I gave her something real, something permanent, it would quiet the doubts her family had planted. So, after months of saving, I bought us a small house. It wasn't flashy or big, but it was ours. A 2-bedroom place with warm light, a quiet backyard, and enough space to build a life together. I remember the day I gave her the keys, her eyes widened, but the first thing she said was, "You bought it." Without asking my parents, that should have been a red flag. Still, I brushed it off. I thought once they saw it, they'd understand. That weekend, her family came over for dinner. I cooked, cleaned, even bought her mom's favorite wine. But from the moment they stepped inside, I could tell it wasn't admiration in their eyes. It was assessment. Her mother ran her fingers over the countertops and said, "Laminate?" Her father peeked out the window. Bit of a commute, isn't it? Claire's sister laughed when she saw the furniture. "It's cute," she said, the same way someone describes a shelter puppy. I laughed it off again, swallowing my pride with every comment. But what broke me was Claire's silence. She didn't defend me, didn't tell them to stop. She just kept smiling, like she was embarrassed for me. That night, I asked, "Do you even like it?" She hesitated. "I love that you tried," she said softly. "I just think maybe my parents are right. We could have waited and gotten something better." "Better," I repeated, "or just more expensive?" She didn't answer. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, realizing I hadn't just bought a house. I'd bought another way for her family to judge me, and for the first time, I started wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. After that night, the house stopped feeling like home. It became a silent reminder of everything I wasn't. Claire stopped spending weekends there. "Mom needs help organizing," she'd say, or "Dad wants me to come by for dinner." At first, I didn't argue. I thought maybe she just needed space to adjust. But weeks turned into months, and the house felt emptier than ever. Whenever I'd ask about the wedding, she'd dodge it. "We're not in a rush," she'd say. "My parents think it's smarter to wait until we're more settled." That word "settled" started to sound like a judgment, not advice. I tried to be understanding, but every time she came home, she seemed a little more distant, a little more polished, like she'd been molded by someone else's expectations. One night, I overheard her on the phone with a friend. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but her voice carried from the hallway. "He's good to me. Yeah, just not what my family expected." The words hit harder than I expected, not what they expected. Like I was some consolation prize for a woman who could have done better when she hung up. I sat there staring at the dinner I'd made, cold, untouched. I wanted to confront her, but what could I say? That I heard the truth out loud. Instead, I just said, "You're home late." She smiled faintly. "Yeah, Mom made lasagna." That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not from anger, but from exhaustion. I realized I was competing with a version of love that was performative, shallow, and conditional. I was losing, because no matter how much I loved her, I couldn't compete with a family that made her ashamed of the life we were supposed to build together, but I didn't mill it yet. The humiliation was only just beginning. Claire's cousin got engaged, and her family invited us to the engagement party. I didn't want a guy I already knew what kind of crowd it would be, the kind that measured worth in car brands and jewelry sizes. But Claire insisted, saying, "It'll be good for you to reconnect with everyone. Reconnect us if I'd ever belonged with them in the first place." When we arrived, I could feel the judgment before anyone said a word. Men in designer suits, women dripping in gold. I was wearing my best outfit, but next to them, I might as well have been invisible. The music was loud, the laughter louder, and somewhere between the fake compliments and champagne toasts. Her mother raised her glass. "To our dear niece," she said, smiling sweetly. and to the kind of generosity and class every marriage should be built on. Then, almost casually, her eyes slid toward me. Some gestures, she added, just speak louder than others. A few people chuckled. Someone whispered something about rings you can actually see. Laughter erupted, and then Claire laughed too, not nervously, not out of discomfort. She actually laughed. My heart stopped. For a moment, I thought I misheard her. But she was smiling, her hand over her mouth, pretending it was all harmless. I excused myself and stepped outside, pretending to take a call. The cold air hit harder than I expected. I stood under the night sky, listening to the muffled party inside, realizing I didn't belong there, not to them, and maybe not even to her anymore. I thought about the hours I worked, the sacrifices I made, the love I poured into a life she no longer respected. That was the night something inside me broke for good. I didn't know it yet. But that humiliation would become the fuel for everything I was about to do next. After that night, I stopped pretending. The laughter from that party echoed in my head for days, her laughter most of all. I couldn't shake it, couldn't forget how effortlessly she joined them in mocking me. Something inside me hardened. I went to work like normal, but my mind was somewhere else. Every plan I'd made for us started to feel like a script I didn't want to follow anymore. I stopped calling her as much. Stopped texting good morning or asking about her day. When she noticed, she'd say, "You've been distant lately." I'd just smile and say, "I've been thinking," and it was true, I'd been thinking about what it would mean to finally put myself first. I started pulling away quietly, strategically. I stopped contributing to the wedding fund. I canceled the decorator we'd booked months ago. When her mom called to check in, I let it go to voicemail. I stopped trying to impress people who would never see me as enough. At work, I spoke to my boss about a position in another city. It wasn't finalized yet, but it gave me something powerful, an option. The idea that I could leave and start over, free from all of them. One night, as Claire scrolled through her phone beside me, I asked, "If everything went wrong tomorrow, if I lost my job, if we lost the house, would you still want this life with me?" She hesitated just long enough to answer everything without saying a word. That silence was all I needed. From that moment, I started planning my exit, not out of anger, but out of clarity. I realized love shouldn't feel like begging for respect, and if she couldn't see my worth, I'd make sure she saw my absence. It all came crashing down one evening. A week before our wedding invitations were supposed to go out, I came home from work to find Claire sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, her face tight with irritation. "My mom said you still haven't confirmed the catering deposit," she said flatly. I didn't even look up as I took off my jacket. "That's because I'm not paying for something that's never going to happen." Her head snapped up. "What's that supposed to mean?" I turned to face her. "It means I'm done, Claire. I'm done trying to earn respect from people who only see my worth in dollars." She stared at me like I'd slapped her. "You're ruining everything," she shouted. "Do you know how hard I've worked to make my family accept you?" That word accept hit like a knife. "Exactly," I said quietly. "You had to make them accept me. That's the problem." Before she could respond, her parents stormed in through the front door. They didn't even knock. Her father's voice was cold, controlled. "If you can't handle responsibility, maybe you shouldn't be marrying our daughter." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're right. Maybe I shouldn't." The silence that followed was suffocating. Claire's eyes welled up as her mother said, "You'll regret this. Men like you always do." I looked at all of them people. I'd bent over backward to please and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Without another word, I grabbed my keys and walked out. That night, I didn't sleep at a friend's or in a hotel. I drove straight to my lawyer's office and signed the paperwork to sell the house by the time the sun rose. I wasn't just done with the wedding. I was done with them, and I had no idea just how poetic the fallout would be. The house sold faster than I expected. A young couple made an offer within days, and by the end of the week, I'd finalized everything. It was mine legally, solely in my name, something her parents had never bothered to ask about. I didn't tell Claire. I didn't need to. I wanted the silence to do the talking this time. A few days later, Claire called me in tears. "You can't just walk away like this," she said between sobs. "My parents are furious. They're saying you blindsided everyone." "Good," I said quietly. They'll finally feel what it's like to lose something they thought they owned. She didn't understand. None of them did. They had mocked me for being cheap, for building a home that wasn't good enough for them. But now that it was gone, they panicked as if the walls and floors they once ridiculed had suddenly become priceless. Her father called me 3 times, leaving messages that started polite and ended with threats about legal action. I didn't respond. Claire showed up at my workplace once, her eyes swollen. "We can fix this," she pleaded. "Just talk to me. I'll make them apologize." I looked at her really, looked at her end for the first time. I didn't see the woman I'd fallen in love with. I saw someone who had chosen comfort over conviction. "Claire," I said softly, "you can't teach respect to people who only understand money." Her lip trembled. "So this is it." I nodded. "This is it." She left crying, and I went back to work, finishing my shift like it was any other day. But inside, I felt lighter, freer. They wanted to measure me by what I could give them, so I gave them the one thing they never thought I would: nothing. And the silence that followed hit them harder than any revenge could. At first, I thought walking away would bring instant peace. But silence has a strange weight to it echoes. The first few weeks were harder than I expected. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from mutual friends, family, even old coworkers. Everyone wanted to know what really happened. I didn't tell them. I didn't defend myself. I let the story twist in whatever direction Claire's family spun it. Soon, I became the villain. The broke fiancé bailed because he couldn't handle pressure. Her family's version spread like wildfire. I lost friends who'd once praised our relationship. I even got a text from one of her cousins saying, "You really embarrassed her, man." Everyone's talking. For a while it got to me. I questioned if I'd gone too far. I'd sit in my empty apartment at night, staring at the bare walls, thinking about the life I almost built. The wedding that never happened. The woman I once thought was my forever. The silence that I'd chosen started to feel like punishment. But then one day, I stumbled across a photo online. Claire's family, all together again, standing in front of their old house. The same cramped home her mother once mocked me for. No designer dresses, no catered smiles, just tired faces. It hit me like a strange kind of closure. I realized something then. Silence doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes, it's the loudest thing you can give. Their world revolved around appearances, and I had shattered that world by simply walking away. No yelling, no revenge plot, just absence. And while they tried to rebuild their image, I was finally learning to rebuild myself. But fate wasn't done yet, because a few months later, one message from Claire would open every wound all over again. It was a Sunday morning when her name flashed across my screen again. I hadn't seen Claire pop up in months, and for a moment, my chest tightened. Against my better judgment, I opened it. The message was long 3 paragraphs that started with, "You were right." She said she'd been too proud to admit how wrong things went after I left. Her father had lost his job months ago, but kept pretending everything was fine. The debts they'd been hiding finally caught up with them, credit cards maxed out. Mortgage overdue, their fancy cars repossessed one by one. "It's ironic," she wrote, "the family that called you cheap now has to sell everything to survive." She told me she missed me, that she realized what I gave her wasn't luxury, it was peace, security, and loyalty. "I thought love meant keeping up with appearances," she said, "but you were the only one who ever made me feel safe without needing to prove anything." I read it twice, maybe 3 times. There was a part of me that wanted to reply, to tell her I understood. But another part, the wiser one, knew this was just her conscience catching up. She wasn't reaching out for me. She was reaching out for closure. I typed 1 line and hit send. "You don't need to apologize, Claire. You just needed to learn." She didn't reply. She didn't have to, because I knew she finally understood what I'd been trying to show all along: love without. Respect isn't love at all, and though I'd moved on, that message wasn't the end. It was the quiet proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't proving them wrong, it's watching them realize it on their own. Months passed after that message, and for the first time in years, I felt, still, no constant noise, no pressure to impress anyone, just quiet mornings, black coffee, and the sound of my own breathing. I moved to a smaller apartment in a quieter city, a place where no one knew my story. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. Sometimes, I'd catch myself thinking about her, not with anger, but with a strange kind of nostalgia. There was love once, real love. But love built on insecurity never survives the test of ego. And Claire's family had been the mirror that showed me what happens when you let other people define your worth. One afternoon, while unpacking boxes in my new place, I found the small velvet box that once held her ring. I opened it and stared at the simple gold band. It still glowed softly in the sunlight, the same way it had on that hill when I thought forever meant something. I didn't feel bitterness, any more just gratitude. That ring had cost me money. Yes, but what I learned after it cost me everything else was priceless. I didn't sell it. I didn't throw it away. I placed it in a drawer as a quiet reminder. Love without respect is just decoration. Now, when I hear people talk about relationships, I smile to myself, because I've lived through the kind where your worth is questioned and I've survived it. They called me cheap. For what? I gave. But in the end, I realized something they never did. The real value of love isn't measured in diamonds, but in dignity, and losing them wasn't my downfall. It was my liberation.